The breaking point. Rebecca Morrison gripped the steering wheel of her Honda Civic and closed her eyes. The underground parking garage was nearly empty at 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday night. Most reasonable people had gone home hours ago. But Becca had stayed late again, trying to fix the presentation that Jonathan Pierce had torn apart in front of the entire marketing team that afternoon. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Another email from Jonathan. Subject line: revisions needed immediately. Becca felt her jaw clench. 3 weeks. She had only been working under Jonathan Pierce for 3 weeks, and already she was questioning every career decision that had led her to this moment. The call that changed everything. Becca reached for her phone and pulled up her contacts. She needed to talk to Olivia. Her best friend since college always knew how to calm her down and put things in perspective. Without looking carefully at the screen, she tapped what she thought was Olivia's name and pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before a deep voice answered. Hello? Liv, you will not believe the absolutely horrible day I just had. Becca started immediately, her frustration pouring out. I am so done with this job. Completely done. I cannot take another day of this nightmare. There was a pause on the other end. A pause that felt just a little too long. I'm listening, the voice said. It was definitely not Olivia. The terrible realization. Becca's stomach dropped. That voice was familiar, but it was male. It was professional. It was controlled. She pulled the phone away from her ear and looked at the screen. The name displayed made her blood run cold: Jonathan Pierce. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, no, no. I believe you were about to tell me about your nightmare of a day, Jonathan said. His tone was unreadable, somewhere between amused and serious. Please, continue. I find this quite interesting. Becca's mind raced. What had she said already? Something about being done with the job. Something about a horrible day. Her professional life flashed before her eyes. She had just complained about her boss to her boss. Mr. Pierce, I am so incredibly sorry, Becca stammered. This was a mistake. I meant to call my friend. I did not mean to bother you. The unexpected response. A mistake, Jonathan repeated slowly. Interesting. So you regularly call your friends to discuss how terrible your job is? Becca felt heat rising to her cheeks. Even alone in her car, she felt exposed. I just had a frustrating day. It happens to everyone. Does it? Jonathan's voice remained steady. Because from what I heard in those first few seconds, it sounded like more than just one bad day. You said you were completely done. Becca closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. This was it. She was going to get fired. She would have to call her parents and tell them she lost another job. She would have to explain to her roommate why she could not pay rent next month. Mr. Pierce, I apologize for my unprofessional behavior, Becca said, trying to sound calm. I should not have said those things. Even if you meant them? Jonathan asked. The question caught Becca off guard. I don't know what you mean. The morning after. I mean, Jonathan continued, that honesty is apparently something you save for your personal calls, not your workplace conversations. I find that telling. Becca did not know how to respond. Was this a trap? Was he trying to get her to admit more complaints so he could document them for HR? We have a team meeting tomorrow at 9, Jonathan said after a moment. I expect you to be there. On time. Of course, Becca replied quickly. I will be there. Good, Jonathan said. Then, just before hanging up, he added something that made Becca's confusion deepen. And Rebecca? Bring that same honesty you were about to share with your friend. I think we need to have a real conversation. The line went dead. Becca sat in stunned silence, her phone still pressed to her ear. What did that mean? Was she being fired face to face? Was this some kind of power play? Her phone rang again, startling her. This time it really was Olivia. "Hey, sorry I missed your call," Olivia said cheerfully. "What's up?" Becca let out a sound that was half laugh, half groan. "Liv, I just made the biggest mistake of my professional life." "What happened?" Olivia's tone shifted immediately to concern. "I tried to call you to complain about my boss," Becca explained, feeling her face burn with embarrassment even though Olivia could not see her. "But I accidentally called my boss instead." "You did not," Olivia gasped. "I did. I literally started ranting about how done I am with my job before I realized I was talking to Jonathan Pierce himself. Friend's advice." Olivia was silent for a moment, then started laughing. "Becca, only you could do something like this." "What did he say?" "That's the weird part," Becca said, starting her car's engine. "He did not sound angry. He sounded almost curious. He told me to come to the meeting tomorrow and bring my honesty with me." "That's either really good or really bad," Olivia said. "There's no in between." "Thank you for that helpful analysis," Becca replied sarcastically, pulling out of her parking spot. "What am I supposed to do? Walk in there tomorrow and just pretend this never happened?" "No way," Olivia said firmly. "If he wants honesty, maybe you should give it to him. What's the worst that could happen?" I could get fired." "You were literally just complaining about wanting to quit," Olivia pointed out. "Maybe this is the universe giving you a push. Either things get better or you move on to something new. Either way, you cannot keep going the way you have been." Sleepless night. Becca drove home in a daze, Olivia's words echoing in her mind. Her best friend was right about one thing. The past 3 weeks had been miserable. She spent every evening stressed, every morning dreading work, and every lunch break updating her resume. Something had to change. That night, Becca barely slept. She rehearsed different scenarios in her mind. Jonathan firing her in front of the whole team. Jonathan calling her into his office for a formal reprimand. Jonathan pretending the call never happened and making her work life even more difficult. But there was one scenario she had not considered, one that seemed too unlikely to even imagine. What if Jonathan actually wanted to listen? What if that strange comment about bringing honesty meant something real? At 3 a.m., Becca gave up on sleep and made herself tea. She sat at her kitchen table and did something she had not done since starting this job. She wrote down everything that frustrated her about the workplace. The impossible deadlines, the lack of communication, the constant criticism without guidance, the culture of fear that made everyone afraid to speak up. By the time the sun rose, Becca had filled 3 pages. She looked at her notes and made a decision. If Jonathan Pierce wanted honesty, she would give it to him. But she would do it professionally, constructively, and without backing down. After all, she had already accidentally told him she was done. What more did she have to lose? Morning tension. Becca arrived at the office at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. She wore her most professional navy blazer and had her notes folded carefully in her portfolio. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like an eternity. Her palms were sweaty despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. The marketing department was already buzzing with activity. Becca noticed several co-workers glancing at her as she walked to her desk. Had word gotten out about the phone call? In an office this size, secrets rarely stayed secret for long. "Becca, hey," Derek Hamilton appeared at her cubicle, lowering his voice. Derek was a senior account manager who had worked under Jonathan for 2 years. "Can I talk to you for a second?" They stepped into the break room. Derek checked to make sure they were alone before speaking. "Listen, I heard Jonathan called an unexpected meeting this morning. Is everything okay? Why would you think something is wrong?" Becca asked, her heart racing. Derek gave her a sympathetic look. Because Jonathan only calls surprise meetings when someone is about to get let go. I have seen it happen 3 times. He brings you in, talks about restructuring or performance issues, and then HR shows up with paperwork. The meeting begins. Becca felt her stomach twist. That's comforting, Derek. Really helpful. I'm just trying to warn you, Derek said. Jonathan Pierce is not someone who tolerates complaints or pushback. If you did something to upset him, you should probably start looking for a new position. Before Becca could respond, her phone buzzed. A calendar notification, meeting with Jonathan Pierce, conference room B, 9 a.m. The walk to conference room B felt like walking to her own execution. Becca kept her head high, clutching her portfolio. If this was the end, she would at least go out with dignity. Jonathan was already in the conference room, sitting at the head of the table. He wore a crisp gray suit and was reviewing something on his tablet. He looked up when Becca entered. "Close the door, please," he said. Becca's hands trembled slightly as she pulled the door shut. The click of the latch sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Have a seat," Jonathan gestured to the chair closest to him, not at the far end of the table. Breaking the ice, Becca sat down, placing her portfolio on the table. She waited for Jonathan to speak first, her prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. Jonathan set down his tablet and looked at her directly. His expression was not angry, but it was serious. "I want to start by acknowledging that last night's phone call was unusual. I imagine you spent the entire night worrying about this meeting." "That would be accurate," Becca admitted. "Good," Jonathan said, surprising her. "Because I spent most of the night thinking about what you said. Or rather, what you were about to say before you realized who you were talking to." Becca's mouth went dry. "Mr. Pierce, I want to apologize again for my unprofessional comments." "Stop apologizing," Jonathan interrupted. "I am not interested in apologies. I am interested in understanding why one of my most talented team members is apparently miserable enough to consider quitting after only 3 weeks." The honest conversation, the comment about being talented, caught Becca completely off guard. "I did not realize you thought I was talented. You rejected my last 4 proposals." "I rejected them because they were not good enough yet," Jonathan said. "Not because you lack talent. There is a difference." Becca felt a flash of frustration break through her nervousness. "How am I supposed to know the difference when you never explain what you want? You just say no and move on." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Go on." "Excuse me?" "You brought notes," Jonathan nodded at her portfolio. "I can see papers in there. Whatever you wrote down last night, I want to hear it. That is why I asked you to bring honesty." Becca hesitated. This could still be a trap. But she had already decided this morning that she had nothing left to lose. She pulled out her 3 pages of notes. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You want honesty? Here it is. The deadlines you set are impossible. You assign projects Friday afternoon and expect completed work Monday morning. You criticize presentations in front of the entire team without offering constructive feedback. You create an environment where people are afraid to ask questions because they do not want to look incompetent." Jonathan's revelation. She paused, waiting for Jonathan to interrupt or shut her down. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Continue." Becca took a breath and kept going. "Communication is terrible. We spend hours guessing what you want instead of asking because previous attempts to clarify have been met with responses like, 'You should know this already.' The team is talented, but everyone is stressed and burned out. We are not failing because we are bad at our jobs. We are failing because the system is broken." The room fell silent. Becca's heart pounded. She had just told her boss everything that was wrong with his management style. Career suicide, complete and total. Jonathan stood up, and Becca braced herself. But instead of ending the meeting, he walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. You are right, he said quietly. Becca blinked. I'm sorry, what? Jonathan turned back to face her. You are right about all of it. The deadlines are impossible. The communication is terrible. I have been managing this team exactly the way I was told to manage it, and it is not working. The truth behind the mask. I don't understand, Becca said slowly. Jonathan returned to his seat, and for the first time since Becca had met him, he looked tired. Really tired. When I took this position 6 months ago, I was told by the executives above me that this department was underperforming. They wanted someone who could push the team harder, demand more, and increase productivity. So that is what I did. But? Becca prompted. But productivity has not increased, Jonathan admitted. It has gotten worse. We have lost 3 good people in the past 4 months. The remaining team members are stressed and unhappy. And I have been so focused on following orders from above that I did not stop to question whether those orders made sense. Becca processed this information. So you are not actually a terrible boss? You are just playing one because someone told you to? A ghost of a smile crossed Jonathan's face. When you put it that way, it sounds even worse than it is. An unexpected alliance. Why are you telling me this? Becca asked. Because your accidental phone call made me realize something, Jonathan said. If my team members feel like they cannot be honest with me, then I have already failed as a manager. I do not want to be the person everyone complains about in parking garages. I want to actually lead this team effectively. So what happens now? Becca asked carefully. Jonathan pulled out his own notebook. Now we figure out how to fix this. You have identified the problems. Let's work together on solutions. For the next hour, Becca and Jonathan had the most productive conversation she had experienced since joining the company. They discussed realistic timelines, better communication structures, and ways to provide constructive feedback. Jonathan shared the pressures he faced from upper management, and Becca explained how those pressures translated into impossible expectations for the team. I want to try something, Jonathan said as the meeting wound down. I am going to push back on the executives. Set more reasonable expectations. But I need the team to trust that I am making these changes in good faith. That might take time, Becca said honestly. You have built a certain reputation. I know, Jonathan acknowledged. Which is why I need someone to help bridge that gap. Someone the team respects who can also work with me to implement these changes. Becca felt a shift in the conversation. What are you asking? A new role. I am asking you to be my partner in this, Jonathan said. Not officially, not yet. But I want your input on team decisions. I want you to tell me when I am falling back into old patterns. I want someone who will be honest with me, the way you were in your notes. You want me to basically tell you when you are being a bad boss? Becca asked incredulously. Essentially, yes, Jonathan said. I know it sounds strange. But that accidental phone call showed me something valuable. You are not afraid to speak truth, even when it is uncomfortable. That is exactly what I need. Becca sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. I came in here thinking I was getting fired. And instead you are getting a promotion, Jonathan said. Or at least, you will be once I can make it official. For now, I need you to trust me enough to give this a chance. Derek's warning echoed in Becca's mind. Jonathan Pierce is not someone who tolerates complaints or pushback. But the man sitting across from her did not match that description. He looked genuinely committed to change. Okay, Becca said finally. I will help. But I have one condition. Name it. If this is going to work, you have to be honest with the whole team about what is changing and why, Becca said. No more pretending everything is fine. No more hiding behind the tough boss image. Jonathan extended his hand across the table. Deal. As Becca shook his hand, she could not help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. 24 hours ago, she had been ready to quit. Now she was partnering with her boss to transform the department. "What's funny?" Jonathan asked. "I was just thinking," Becca said, "that I should accidentally call the wrong person more often." The new dynamic. 3 weeks passed, and the marketing department began to transform. Jonathan implemented the changes he and Becca had discussed, starting with more reasonable deadlines and weekly team meetings where everyone could voice concerns without fear of criticism. The shift was subtle at first, but gradually, the tension that had hung over the office like a dark cloud started to lift. Becca found herself in an unusual position. She was not officially Jonathan's second in command, but everyone could see that something had changed. He consulted her before making major decisions. He asked her to review his feedback before delivering it to other team members. He even invited her to sit in on his meetings with upper management. "People are starting to talk," Derek mentioned one afternoon as he and Becca grabbed coffee from the break room. "Wondering what is going on between you and Jonathan." Becca rolled her eyes. "Nothing is going on. We are just working together to make this department better." "Right," Derek said, clearly unconvinced. "And it is totally normal for the boss to completely change his management style overnight because of one random team member." "It was not overnight," Becca protested. "And I am not just some random team member. I gave him honest feedback, and he actually listened." Derek stirred sugar into his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, I have worked here for 2 years, and I have never seen Jonathan Pierce admit he was wrong about anything. Whatever you said to him must have been pretty powerful." The executive meeting. Becca did not have time to respond because her phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan, "Conference room in 5. Bringing you to the executive meeting. Be ready." Her stomach flipped. She had sat in on department meetings, but never an executive-level discussion. Those meetings included Amanda Pierce, the company owner and Jonathan's sister, along with Gregory Foster, the chief operating officer who was known for his aggressive business tactics. Becca grabbed her tablet and headed to the executive conference room on the 15th floor. Jonathan met her at the elevator, looking more tense than she had seen him in weeks. "Quick briefing," he said as they walked. "Amanda called this meeting to discuss department performance. Foster is going to push for more aggressive metrics. I need you there to back me up when I present our new approach." "You want me to disagree with the COO?" Becca asked nervously. "I want you to present the data that shows our new approach is working," Jonathan corrected. "Let the numbers speak for themselves." The conference room was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Chicago. Amanda Pierce sat at the head of the table, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was younger than Becca expected, probably in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to evaluate everything. Gregory Foster sat to Amanda's right, reviewing documents on his tablet. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and an expression that suggested he was already annoyed by the meeting. "Jonathan," Amanda said warmly. "And this must be Rebecca Morrison. I have heard interesting things about you. Presenting the changes." Becca shook Amanda's hand, trying not to show her nervousness. "Thank you for including me, Ms. Pierce." "Please, call me Amanda," the owner said. "Jonathan tells me you have been instrumental in some recent departmental changes." Gregory looked up from his tablet, his expression skeptical. "Changes that we have not approved or reviewed. I have to say, Jonathan, I am concerned about you abandoning the productivity protocols we established." "With respect, Gregory, those protocols were not producing results," Jonathan said firmly. "Our team was stressed, turnover was high, and actual productivity was declining. The changes Rebecca and I implemented have reversed those trends." "In 3 weeks?" Gregory scoffed. "That is hardly enough time to measure meaningful change." This was Becca's cue. She pulled up her presentation on the room's main screen. Actually, we are already seeing measurable improvements. Team morale surveys are up 30%. We have completed 4 major projects ahead of schedule. And we have not lost a single team member to resignation or transfer. Gregory frowned at the data. Surveys and feelings do not translate to profit. But completed projects do, Becca continued, clicking to the next slide. The previous approach demanded speed, but the quality suffered. We were delivering mediocre work quickly. The new approach prioritizes quality and collaboration. Our clients are noticing the difference. She pulled up client satisfaction scores. Every metric showed improvement. Amanda leaned forward, studying the numbers with interest. These are compelling results. What specifically changed? The philosophy shift. Jonathan took over. We stopped treating the team like machines that needed to be pushed harder. We started treating them like professionals who needed support and clear communication. We set realistic deadlines. We provided constructive feedback. We created an environment where people felt safe to ask questions and suggest improvements. That sounds soft, Gregory said dismissively. We are running a business, not a therapy session. We are running a business full of human beings, Becca shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. And human beings do not perform well when they are constantly stressed and afraid. The data proves it. Gregory's eyes narrowed. I do not think a junior marketing specialist is qualified to lecture me about business management. Then maybe you should listen to the results instead of the title, Becca replied, her confidence growing. Because the approach you championed was failing. Our approach is succeeding. The numbers do not care about hierarchy. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Becca wondered if she had just committed career suicide for the second time in a month. But Jonathan gave her a small nod of approval. Amanda's revelation. Amanda Pierce stood up and walked to the window, her back to the group. When she turned around, she was smiling. Gregory, could you give us the room, please? She said. The COO looked surprised. Amanda, I think we should discuss this further. I will call you later, Amanda said firmly. It was clearly not a request. Gregory gathered his things and left, shooting Jonathan and Becca a look that promised this conversation was not over. Once the door closed, Amanda's demeanor completely changed. She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. That was perfect, she said, addressing both Jonathan and Becca. Absolutely perfect. Jonathan looked confused. I do not understand. Amanda returned to her seat, her expression now warm rather than intimidating. I owe you both an explanation. Jonathan, when I promoted you to department head 6 months ago, I gave you specific instructions. Push the team hard. Demand more. Be tough and uncompromising. Instructions I followed, Jonathan said, still confused. Instructions I knew were wrong, Amanda said. I was testing you. The real test. Becca felt her jaw drop. You deliberately told him to be a bad manager? I told him to manage the way Gregory Foster insists all departments should be managed, Amanda corrected. Gregory has been with this company for 20 years. He built his reputation on aggressive tactics and treating employees as expendable resources. I inherited him when I took over from my father. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, processing this information. You wanted to see if I would blindly follow orders or think for myself. Exactly, Amanda confirmed. Every department head I have promoted in the past 3 years has received the same test. Most of them followed Gregory's approach without question. A few pushed back but could not articulate why. None of them actually fixed the problem. Until now, Becca said slowly. Amanda nodded. Until you accidentally called your boss and told him exactly what was wrong. Jonathan, you did something none of the others did. You listened. You admitted you were wrong. And you worked with your team to find a better solution. That is actual leadership. And the executive meeting? Jonathan asked. Was that part of the test too? I wanted to see how you would handle Gregory's criticism, Amanda said. Whether you would back down or stand firm. And I wanted to see if Rebecca had the courage to defend your new approach even when facing opposition from a senior executive. Becca felt a mix of relief and frustration. So this whole thing was orchestrated? Not the phone call, Amanda said with a smile. That was genuine serendipity. But everything else, yes. I have been watching your department closely. The changes you have made are exactly what this company needs. The bigger picture. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. So where does this leave us? It leaves you as the model for how I want all departments to operate, Amanda said. Gregory Foster represents the old way of doing business. It worked in the past, but times have changed. Employees have options now. They do not have to tolerate toxic workplaces. If we want to attract and retain top talent, we need to evolve. And Gregory? Becca asked. He did not seem happy about any of this. Gregory is retiring at the end of the year, Amanda revealed. He does not know it yet, but his position is being eliminated. I am restructuring the entire company based on the principles you two have demonstrated. Collaboration over competition. Support over intimidation. Results through respect. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Becca had thought she was just trying to improve her own work situation. She had not realized she was part of a much larger transformation. Rebecca, Amanda said, turning her attention fully to Becca. Jonathan has recommended you for a promotion to associate director. Normally I would say you need more experience, but you have already proven you have the instincts and courage needed for leadership. What do you say? Coming full circle. Becca looked at Jonathan, who smiled encouragingly. A month ago, she had been ready to quit. Now she was being offered a promotion by the company owner. I say yes, Becca replied. But I have one condition. Amanda raised an eyebrow. You are negotiating with me? You just said you value people who speak up, Becca pointed out. So I am speaking up. If I am going to help lead this department, I want a commitment that we will never go back to the old way. No matter what pressures we face. The team deserves consistency. Amanda extended her hand across the table. Deal. I like you, Rebecca. You remind me of myself 10 years ago. Welcome to the leadership team. As they shook hands, Becca felt a surge of pride and disbelief. She had gone from accidental phone call to associate director in less than a month. After the meeting ended and they returned to their floor, Jonathan stopped Becca in the hallway. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Accidentally calling you and starting this whole mess? Jonathan laughed. For being honest when everyone else was too afraid. For pushing me to be better. For standing up to Gregory even though you were terrified. How did you know I was terrified? Becca asked. Because I was terrified too, Jonathan admitted. Change is scary. But having someone in your corner makes it possible. The perfect ending. That evening, Becca finally had the chance to call Olivia and tell her everything that had happened. Wait, Olivia interrupted halfway through the story. The company owner deliberately made your boss act terrible just to test him? Apparently, Becca confirmed, curled up on her couch with a glass of wine. And my accidental phone call started a chain reaction that changed the entire company. Only you, Becca, Olivia laughed. Only you could but dial your way into a promotion. I did not but dial him, Becca protested. I thought I was calling you. Same difference. So what now? Are things going to be weird between you and Jonathan? Becca thought about the question. Honestly? I think we make a good team. He respects my opinion, and I respect his willingness to change. It is not weird. It is just different. Different good or different bad? Different good, Becca said with certainty. Really good. After hanging up with Olivia, Becca reflected on the past month. One mistaken phone call had changed everything. She had learned that honesty, even accidental honesty, had power. She had learned that good leaders could admit when they were wrong. And she had learned that sometimes the biggest disasters turned into the best opportunities. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan: "Team celebration tomorrow. Your idea about monthly appreciation lunches is officially approved. Well done, partner." Becca smiled and typed back, "See you tomorrow, boss." Then she deleted it and wrote instead, "See you tomorrow, Jonathan." Because that was the real change. Not just in titles or policies, but in relationships. They were no longer just boss and employee. They were colleagues working toward the same goal. And it had all started with one wrong number. Becca raised her wine glass in a solitary toast. Here's to accidental phone calls and happy endings. In the window's reflection, she saw herself smiling. For the first time in months, she was genuinely excited about going to work tomorrow. The end.